What's up, everybody? This is American Shogun coming to you once again from the Temple of Iron. I just finished up a good workout, and after this we'll be hitting the sauna. And I wanted to tackle a topic that I have been interested in doing since I started doing these videos, more political and social commentary. It's a hot button topic. It's a topic that will likely offend a lot of people, has the potential to get very personal with a lot of people. And it's really two issues. The issue of declining marriage rates in Western society, in America, specifically with millennials. My generation, which millennials usually early 20s to late 30s, that's more or less the frame, you know, like maybe 23, usually doesn't get much younger than that, up to 37 or 38. That's around about the year gap. So early 1980s up to around 1997 or 1996. So there's a lot of confusion on what a millennial is. If you're in high school, you're not a millennial. Generation Z or Generation X and baby boomers, they're in high school, they're not millennials. You know, and Generation Z Zoomers, if they like Nirvana in the 90s, they're not a baby boomer. You know, but specifically marriage declining with millennials, and then birth rates declining with millennials being less than past generations, and just birth rates in Western society declining. Now, this is going to be a topic where there's lots of facts and statistics. I'll be linking a lot of polls and studies in the box below. I am not advanced enough with these videos to where I'm going to be putting links in the video itself. So you're just going to have to look up the links I put in the description box, fact check yourself, do your own research, which is always the best thing. But with millennials, we are around 50-50 on people getting married and people not getting married. Really, most of the numbers I found show that millennials are actually, there's a higher percentage of millennials not getting married, over 50%. In addition to that, birth rates are going down. Millennials are having children at less rates than baby boomers and Generation Z. So millennials right now, we are getting married less and having children less. Now, for the marriage rates, I've seen a lot of articles and arguments that marriage is declining because the cost of living, student loans, tough to get a good paying job. And honestly, I can sympathize with a lot of those ideas as a millennial. I think student loans hit millennials harder than any other generation before. And just the general cost of living, yeah, things are expensive. You know, the job market's very competitive. Although there are a lot of trade jobs available that pay very well that millennials aren't really going for. But the thing is about marriage makes all that easier. Taxes become easier. You get more back. You have someone to depend on. You have a spouse that can help pick up the slack. If you're low on money one month, they're working as well. They can help bring stuff in. They can, obviously, not as big of a deal, but they can help with chores. They can help with, you know, self-sustainability, planting a garden, growing your own food, you know, helping motivate one another. Marriage is the solution to the millennial economic issues. Because again, I've just seen millennials say, oh, these are why millennials aren't getting married, these reasons. Basically the things I just listed: housing, jobs, cost of living, and student loans. All of that becomes easier when you're married. That's a fact. You know, unless you have a very dysfunctional marriage and the two of you are both incompetent, okay? But in general, it'll help those things. Now, the birth rates, obviously, if people aren't getting married, or if over 50% of millennials are not getting married, then very likely over 50% of millennials are not having children either. And that's the numbers. Around about over 50% are not having children. Now, I've seen the memes about a lot of millennials posting, all my friends are getting married and having children, and I'm just over here drinking my wine, or whatever it may be, whatever cringy meme it might be. And again, I know, like I said, this is a hot button issue. It's a topic that might offend people, but it's reality. I'm not trying to have malicious intent with talking about this. It just is what it is, but statistically, that's wrong. And I also see people talking about, the single mothers that have children out of wedlock, you should say. They're not married, they get knocked up, have kids. And people are acting like it's a plague in America and Western society. Well, it's not statistically, it's a fact. And especially with white women, like the white women, Caucasians are especially having less children. So these are facts. I'll be posting links below. You can do your own research. Now, I would say these are negatives, 100%, and I have more or less around about 5 points to talk about as to why this is negative. I hope that these problems could be corrected, but I don't think they will be with my generation. I think Generation Z will have to pick up the slack for millennials, unfortunately. And if we continue on, if this trend continues on with Generation Z, it just moves Western society closer to its collapse. That's the only way it can end. Also, quick segue, something that could be contributing to the lower birth rates as well, which I know it does, but it's a topic for another video, is the declining testosterone in men in Western society. It's been going on for over 30 years now, heavily documented and studied, and it's been going down. It's just one of those things where they know it's going down, but the professionals really can't give a reason why. Again, there's a lot of theories and ideas as why, which I'm not going to get into that today, but I would say that plays into it. To get onto it though, the first point is related to sustainability and any type of civil conflict that I've been talking about, boogaloo situation. You could say that being single would be more beneficial to you. If you're a woman, it definitely will not be. If you're in any type of survival situation, on average, women, well, it's a fact biologically, they are weaker than men, strength-wise. And you put a society or a region in a dog-eat-dog world, or a kill or be killed scenario where resources are scarce, that's going to be a nightmare for a lot of women. For men, they're not going to have that family unit to fall back on. They'll have their parents, but it'll be all them, lone warriors. And it's a lot easier to handle livestock and to tend a garden or plant multiple gardens when you have a family backing you up. In 10 to 15 years, I'm going to have multiple children that will greatly be able to aid me and my wife with tending gardens. Even before then, even before that age range, and defend our house if need be. Now, of course, I'm going to be the first line of defense to defend them, but it's good to know that I could have help, eyes watching, ears listening, and if possible, hands fighting if it came to that. So that's something to consider. Of course, that point is not going to impress a lot of people. That's not going to be a big concern for a lot of people. Well, point 2, your parents. You may have siblings, but let's just talk about you. When it comes to their care as they get older, it's going to be up to you and you alone to help them. Maybe they're really well off. Maybe they're rich. Maybe they have a lot of money and they don't really need you. That's great. That probably isn't going to be the situation for most Americans, though. So all of their care and their security is going to fall on you. Let me tell you, I think anyone would agree from personal experience, if you've got a family unit backing you up, it is much easier to help your parents. And they're not grandparents, you don't have children, it's going to be hard. I know just from, this is anecdotal, but in my life, I had to help my grandparents and even great-grandparents when I was really young in different situations. You know, it makes small crisis situations a lot easier. It makes trying times a lot easier. So that's something to consider as your parents get older. You don't have any family to help. You don't have a wife. You don't have a husband. That can be, maybe you don't have kids, but a wife, if you're a man, is going to be a tremendous help with taking care of your parents as they get older. Tremendous help. So that's, I feel, a big issue that's going to blindside a lot of people, because again, the millennial generation is very self-centered. You know, I didn't really touch on this initially, but millennials are a very, you know, in the moment, you know, I want this, I need this. I don't want something or someone to hold me back. You know, I don't want somebody, spouse, dictating what I can and can't do, my hobbies, my free time, my friends, my career. So I think that'll play doubly into when their parents get older. You know, they'll say, oh, I don't want to be bogged down by having to take care of my parents. You know, and again, that would be a lot easier if you had a spouse or children helping you. That's something that I probably should have really gone over, is the one of the reasons why millennials are choosing to not get married. And you know, a lot of that I think is just the culture that we've raised ourselves in, and the lack of religion, a lack of family unity, the lack of community unity, because there's really the ties that would bind people together and kind of call for marriage and require marriage in the past aren't there as much. You know, with religion, there was a desire to be fruitful and multiply. And also, of course, you know, it's supposed to mirror the relationship of Christ and the church coming together. The husband being Christ, the church being the wife. It's supposed to mirror that. Well, if you have people who don't care about that, then that's not going to be a motivating factor. Now, obviously, being fruitful and multiplying isn't going to be a motivating factor. And again, just with the instant gratification culture we have, marriage is not something that's ideal for that, because marriage takes time. I'm not going to go into big spiel about marriage, you know, being hard and rewarding and taking all that effort. People already know that, and I think that's why millennials aren't getting married. One big reason why. So yeah, that's kind of a segue back to the beginning as to why millennials aren't getting married. I think it honestly just comes down to the culture that we currently live in and the tendencies of the millennial generation, the desires. Honestly, I would say a failure on the part of Generation X and the baby boomers, because, you know, they're the ones who raised us. They're the ones who helped shape society. And I think just the past 100 years or so, there's been a great decline in community and religion in America. I think the two of those things have in turn led to the decline of the family. And now we're kind of in the end stages of the end result of what that means. Less marriage. If the family unit's been eroded, religion and community's been eroded, then what real purpose does marriage have? You know, obviously, like I said, there are economic benefits to it, raw economic benefits, but the culture, I think, is outweighing that for a lot of people. And again, probably should have gone over that earlier, but the third point in all this, and this is the big one. This is the really one of the really big ones that has me worried more so. Now, as millennials get older themselves, if you have over 50% of the millennial population that is not getting married and having children, they're going to have a lot of difficulty when they get elderly. If you are by yourself when you are an elder, you know, someone that's elderly, who's going to be taking care of you? Let's say you're married, but you don't have children. Again, going back to the idea of you having to take care of your parents, that's typically what most people in society have done. That's how societies have functioned. All societies really function that way. So when you get older and you don't have any children to take care of you, what's going to happen? Now, I haven't talked about this part, but I would argue, I think this is harder to prove statistically, but I would argue that conservatives and Christians and people you could say just more right-wing are the ones who are getting married these days and having children. Not completely, not totally, of course, but I would say a large portion of the people, millennials getting married and having children, are more conservative. And you have, on the other side, I would say people who are more liberal, progressive, left-leaning, whatever you'd want to say. And those are the people, and irreligious, non-religious, whatever it may be, on that side. Now, with that in mind, I think it's going to be the natural inclination for these people who don't have children as they get older it's going to be natural for them to look to the state and the government as their safety net rather than their community, their church, and their family. It's just going to be their train of thinking. And I think we're prone to have a crisis of older millennials having no one to care for them and not having the finances to care for themselves. Maybe there'll be some super rich people with bukus of money. I don't think, again, that's not going to be the general rule. So you'll have that, and you'll have a lot of these people coming to the realization, oh no, what are we going to do? And they're going to be reaching out to the government. They're going to be asking for more subsidies, massive overhaul, more or less of healthcare. Not just healthcare, but a whole new division. I would imagine, a department of government specifically devoted to the living expenses and quality of senior citizens, a whole generation of millennials, senior citizen millennials. Now, who is this going to fall on tax-wise? Who's going to bear the brunt of the tax burden? That's going to be the married people. That's going to be the millennials who are married, the higher earners in society, which I would argue would be families. They're going to be taxed. They're going to have to help support this lifestyle. So that's something that I'm honestly very worried about, because again, what are you going to do? What are they going to do if they don't have children to take care of them? And again, my analysis is that they're going to be naturally more inclined to leftist and liberal policies. So it's just going to be natural for them to look to the government for help. So that's very alarming to me. Now, the fourth point, which this is more or less, it's something, again, this is a bigger one. But you got to think of it this way. What is one of the primary ways that ideas and beliefs and ideologies are transferred over time? The family unit. Families instilling certain values, ways of thinking into their children, training them up in certain ways. Well, if you have around 50% of millennials not getting married and having children, the other half doing it, you're going to have their offspring, the generation they'll bring forth, very slanted in what they believe. Now, obviously, there'll be diversity, there'll be changes and people not abiding by what they were taught. But if it's true that more conservatives and Christians and right-wingers are going to be getting married and having children in the millennial generation, and the other half that is more liberal or to the left aren't having children or getting married, what's the generation that the millennials bring forth going to look like? More than likely, it's going to be a very conservative generation. Ideally, for me, because I'm a conservative, so I would like that. But I'm just saying, from a practical or a factual standpoint, wouldn't you say that would be the case? And if so, you're going to have a large group of people in America kind of disenfranchised when it comes to voting, because the generation the workforce generation is going to be the offspring of people in the millennial generation that would oppose them, that, you know, don't believe that way. You know, they're not populating the nation or, you know, America with offspring who share their values. They're not populating America with anyone. So that, I think that's going to be an issue for them. Now, I'll say this, I don't really think that's going to matter, because with the massive influx of legal immigrants that we've had in this nation the past decade or longer, 2 decades, you know, several million a year now, they're going to be their voting bloc, because statistically, all legal immigrants, legal now, they statistically have been voting more and more Democratic, with the Democratic Party and liberal. So they'll have a voting bloc regardless. Now, the final point is, again, I kind of touched on earlier, if this continues, if the decline in marriage and birth rates continue in America and Western society at large, that's going to be very catastrophic. You're going to have pretty much a changing of the nation to where the families who have been here for generations slowly start to disappear, and America is totally reshaped into a new people. Or you could say the current majority will become a minority. Now, again, I think with how culture currently is, because again, I would say culture, you know, lack of focus on the community, lack of religion, those are pretty much the 2 biggest contributing factors. And, you know, the elevation of the individual over the community. I think those factors are going to be heavily influential into whether or not the marriage rates will go back up and birth rates will go back up. Because again, in my opinion, without religion, specifically Christianity, there's no real reason to get married in large numbers and procreate. That's how I see it. Obviously, that's definitely more of an opinion of mine, but I believe it to be 100% true. Now, again, I didn't want to offend anybody with this topic. I'm not the first person to talk about it, but I really haven't seen a lot of people tackle the marriage issue in depth. And it's something I'd like to go more into on I guess the decline of certain values that uphold marriage in America. You know, I think a lot of it really does, again, with the culture, the instant gratification culture, you know, the social media culture, getting the likes, getting the views, even though I'm on YouTube, you know, but it's an instant gratification culture. And again, marriage isn't built around that. And raising children definitely isn't built around instant gratification. It's about, I mean, that more so than marriage is massively about self-sacrifice and putting others before yourself. Now again, I hope it could be corrected, but at this point, I don't see that happening. I think it'll be honestly a good 10 more years before we could really say if things are going to improve in this regard with marriage rates and childbirth rates, you know, in America. Also, interesting closing side note, statistically, Christians and conservatives adopt more than liberals and non-Christians. So a lot of the kids who are getting adopted are going to be raised in religious homes versus secular or irreligious. But as usual, be prepared, and God bless the Republic.